Welcome, everybody. My name is Austin Bunce with the Davidson Athletic Fund. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you can please stay on mute. And then also at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a Q&A button. We're going to use that tonight for your questions and coach's answers. So if you can just type in your questions in there, and then we'll be able to see them. And then when we get to the Q&A portion later, we'll send them out to the group as they're answered. So with that, Matt, you're up.
Well, thank you so much, Austin, and thank you all for being here. Austin sent me the list of all those who had registered, and I saw Fast Break Club members, donors, alums, classmates of mine from Davidson, people from around town, former players and coaches. I think I saw my mother-in-law is going to be on here. It is special seeing all of those who are so invested and so interested in our program. And those of you who know me know that, one, I can talk a lot and sometimes a little bit too fast. So I'm going to try to be best, or my best with that. But two, I can talk a lot about Davidson basketball. But tonight, what I'd like to do is share some thoughts on my first year, which could be an entire speaking series, but to give you a bit of an overview of this past season, what our spring was like, and the optimism that we have heading into the summer, and a bit of an outlook for next year. I'm really proud of what we accomplished this year as a team. I felt that we got every bit out of this team as we could, and I felt that we got better and better. The environment in our gym and in our locker room was one that allowed for a young, inexperienced team with many new players and new roles, and a first-year head coach who they were learning to trust. But for them to be energized and enthusiastic and to maintain the right attitude when we faced adversity, which we certainly did. But I really do feel that we embraced it. We started the year very strong. We were 6-1 with a crazy double overtime win against Wright State on the road. We went 2-1 down in Charleston with a great win over the University of South Carolina. We had a wonderful home win at Thanksgiving weekend against San Francisco. But through that 6-1 record, we as a staff, we'd get back, we'd watch the film of those games, and despite the winning outcomes, we did not feel like we were a great team or playing particularly well. And the reality was that Foster Loyer shot the ball so well. We felt that we were winning because of an individual was playing great, not necessarily because we were playing like a great team or yet to be a great team. And it was around December when opponents decided that they were going to do everything they could to make others beat us and zero in on Foster and not allow Foster to be the one to beat them. And that's when we were exposed a bit, and we were not able to make the shots that we did early on and win on talent alone. But despite that, we went up to Indianapolis, we played Purdue toe-to-toe, and we saw that we had what it takes. We just needed everyone to be perfect. We had little room for error. And we started conference play, and we faced a very challenging conference schedule. Over the year, we played eight games against the top 4 teams in our conference. They'd have rankings, they have metrics, and we had far and away the most challenging conference schedule, more so than anybody else in the Atlantic 10. What made it even more challenging or worse was that we had 6 of those games in the month of January. So we felt like we were getting better, and in some cases playing well enough where we deserved to win those games, but we were playing better teams and we could not get those wins. 7 losses in that month of January, aside from the game that we played on the road to VCU, 6 of them were tied in the final 8 minutes of play. So we were right there. We were close. We just had so little margin for error. A big part of that was how we shot the ball, or how we didn't shoot the ball. We finished the year shooting just under 32%, 31.9% from 3. We were actually under 30% in conference play through the middle of February. That was the worst Davidson shooting team in the past 20 years. But like I mentioned, our players had the right attitude, the right resilience, enthusiasm to come in the gym. And despite the losses and despite not being rewarded with the wins, we believed that we were still getting better every single day. We walked out of practice every day being proud of the work we were putting in and knowing that we had a chance to beat anybody. Finally, then in February, we started to see those rewards. We played well. In the month of February, our offense was one of the top 40 offenses in the country. We were fortunate to earn a bye. At one point, it did not look like that was going to even be possible, but we ended up earning a bye in the conference tournament, in the Atlantic 10 tournament up in Brooklyn. We played well and had a nice win against St. Bonaventure, and then we ultimately ran into a very good VCU team and did not play particularly well in the quarterfinals. But there's a lot to be said for our team, which was very young, going up to Brooklyn, feeling what it's like to win a game in the Barclays Center, and then also feeling what it's like to lose a game, to have it come to an end in an environment like that. I know that's going to play dividends come next postseason. We always like to break things down statistically. So I'm going to share some statistics that shed a light on the year we had. Something that we led the league in was availability. And that's a word that never used to be used, but availability is incredibly important. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Our players being available to play. There is no better sports performance team in college basketball than the one that we have here at Davidson. And by sports performance team, I'm talking about our athletic trainer, Justin King, our strength and conditioning coach, Brian Seitz, and Elizabeth Allred, our head dietitian. Nobody in the country does the work to the level that those three do to help our team be as healthy as we have been. And I have a wood desk. I'm knocking on it that we were able to remain so injury-free throughout the year. We had one player miss a game, one player in our rotation miss a game due to not being healthy enough. And that was when Foster Lawyer had food sickness and food poisoning and could not play in our home game against VCU. It's the only time we had a player in our rotation miss a game due to not being healthy. We could talk a lot about our staff and our players, but Justin King, our athletic trainer, is exceptional. He does not have an off day. We'll play on Wednesday. We'll play on Saturday. Sunday's an off day from practice. Our staff will not have to be in the office. Justin is in the training room getting our players treatment, doing rehabilitation work with our players on every single off day. He works as hard as anybody on this entire campus, I would say. Statistically, our on-court efficiencies, both offensively and defensively, had us actually ranked the 5th best team in the Atlantic 10. Now, that may not make sense, but we were believed to be the 5th best team in the Atlantic 10. Like I mentioned, we had the most challenging in-conference schedule, but there's also a statistic called luck. And I'm serious. There is a website and it ranks luck. And that includes the strength of schedule. That includes how well or poorly a team shoots from the free throw line, which really there's not necessarily a lot of outlying factors in somebody shooting it better or worse than certain games. But teams always happen to shoot better from the free throw line against Davidson. Some games that we lost, we ended up shooting lower than our standard percentages. And the same thing again with the conference schedule. There's this luck factor where you don't necessarily perform to the level that your statistics say you should. And we were very unlucky this year. Interestingly enough, when we won the A-10 championships in 2021-22, we had the best luck in the Atlantic 10. So hopefully we have a little more luck on our side next year. But I say those things to say it gave us great confidence going into the spring, knowing that we got better, that we played our best in February and in March, and knowing that we have people in our locker room and in this program who play for each other and have what it takes to continue to improve from how we finish the season. So we entered the spring, and after the season, we gave all of our players 2 weeks off, and we had a 5-week off season. From those 2 weeks up until graduation, that was 5 weeks. And we had a 3-pronged approach to our off-season work. We wanted to improve with our strength and conditioning. We wanted to improve with our skills, namely shooting. And we wanted to improve and constantly challenge our competitiveness. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those. For strength and conditioning, obviously, we want to get bigger and we want to get stronger. We were one of the youngest teams in the country last year, and one of the youngest teams, if not the youngest team in the Atlantic 10. And I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go, but we played against a lot of fifth-year players, a lot of graduate transfers, even some sixth-year players. There's no magical way for our players to get older. While other teams are building their rosters through these 5th and 6th-year players and graduate transfers, we have to, in our own way, get older with our toughness and with our physicality, and that is through the work that we do in the weight room. And I've mentioned Brian Seitz a minute ago. I can rave about all the work he does with our players, but I think the easiest measuring stick for the work that he did is if you look at our 4 freshmen from this past year, from when they got to Davidson and when they just left 2 weeks ago after their exams. Reed Bailey added 10 pounds during his freshman year. AC, Achille Spadone, added 15 pounds during his freshman year. Brock Matheny added 17 pounds during his freshman year. And Sean Logan, who we believe has an unbelievably high ceiling in terms of his talent and what he can do in this program, he added 20 pounds in this season from when he got here to when he left. The other level of improvement, skills and shooting. And that seems so obvious. But for us, as I mentioned, we really struggled to shoot the ball this year, the way that we've come to expect at Davidson. So I mentioned we shot just under 32%, the worst Davidson shooting team in a very, very long time. 2 years ago, when we won the Atlantic 10 championships, we were 4th in the nation in three-point percentage. This past year, we were 395th in the nation in three-point percentage. And believe me, when we were going through some struggles, we're looking at the math and we're trying to figure out what could we be doing wrong? What do we need to do better? And we're also looking for ways to feel better about ourselves, I guess, as well. So if the second worst shooting team ever shot 33.7%, if this past year's team shot just as good as the worst team before this year, so if we shot just 33.7%, we'd have won 7 more games. And I say that because in the games that we lost that were by very close margins and the number of threes we took in those games, if we would have bumped that percentage up to 33.7%, the number of threes that we would have made would have accounted for 7 more wins. So obviously a big part of our spring and our big part of our offseason has been to improve as shooters. So we had a shooting competition throughout the spring, and you could do it as a team, you could do it in partners, but we split the whole roster up into 2 groups. And there were certain ways you could earn points, but ultimately it came down to getting as many shots up throughout the spring as possible. In that 5 weeks of competition, our team made over 34,000 threes. Didn't shoot 34,000 threes. We made 34,000 threes, and we made just under 10,000 free throws. Again, we didn't shoot 10,000 free throws. We made 10,000 free throws. And the individual leader amongst all of those was Hunter Adam, who I'll talk a little bit more about. But Hunter is one of our newcomers, one of our freshmen from New Zealand who arrived here in January. And then the other piece of improvement was competition. We wanted to be competitors. We wanted to have competitive toughness at the highest level possible. So each week of our workouts, we ended the week on Fridays with a practice that included nothing but live competitive drills. We split our team up into 2 separate teams, and we kept those teams for all 5 weeks. And there was 1-on-1 competitions, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5 competitions. We kept score with everything, and we put the score on our wall. And those scores remained up there throughout the entire month of March, April, and until May when everybody left, we finally erased it. But I think our players love the fact that that's how we can finish the week at our best, competing for success, competing for winning. And then as we always do, we competed in open gym and had pickup games throughout every week. And what was pretty special was that there were days where Kellen Grady was in our gym playing with our players. And Mike Jones and Nelson, they spent a weekend here and they were in the gym playing with our players. Emery Lanier came back and visited his buddies. He was playing with our players. And Rusty Regal came down from Charlotte and made some crafty plays and got a lot of loose balls one or 2 weekends coming and playing with our players. I don't think any team in the country had games like that on weekends this spring, where they can talk about the type of players that you have now, but also the type of players that still want to come back and be a part of our program. One thing that we constantly talked about with our team was how we were improving at a rate this spring that no other team in this country was improving at. And you're welcome to ask questions in which I can talk more about it, but the landscape of college basketball is wild right now. I think I saw a number earlier this week that approximately 1 in every 3 players in Division I has entered the transfer portal. So while every team in college basketball was trying to put together their rosters this spring, and their coaches were spending their entire offseason traveling and recruiting, we were in the gym. We had 11 players in each of those Friday workouts, and every one of our coaches was with them in every single one of those workouts. I can promise you that did not exist. So I'm very confident saying that no team worked harder or improved more collectively in the entire country than our team did this spring. So obviously I mentioned the transfer portal. There are these changes taking place throughout college athletics, and unfortunately we're not immune to it. Des Watson decided to transfer, and we wish him well, and we're going to be playing against him for the next 2 years as he's decided to transfer in our league to Loyola Chicago. And Sam Menenga had a very productive year and was offered an incredibly lucrative contract to return close to home to play in Australia, which is a very good pro league that has recently invested a lot more money in trying to sign young players that would hopefully stay home. And Sam was a target of theirs in the offseason. And I think Sam is making more money in his first year professionally than anybody that Davidson's had other than Steph Curry and maybe Jason Richards. So, and Sam could not have been more appreciative of this opportunity being available to him because of the experience he had at Davidson and how much better he got by being a part of our program. But that being said, we are thrilled about the 5 newcomers that we have. 2 of whom did not seem like newcomers to our team, to our staff, and many of you who would have maybe seen them in a practice or noticed them on the bench. Angelo Brizzi arrived in January. He is a transfer from Villanova. We recruited him out of high school. We thought he was a perfect fit out of high school. He went to Villanova last year to play for Jay Wright. It was his plan on going there to redshirt his freshman year. So after this year, he will still have 3 years of eligibility to play for us. He is very talented. He can play point guard, shooting guard, combo guard. He can play on and off the ball. He has a little bit of Jack Gibbs in him, and that's one of the reasons why he loved Davidson, because we showed him a lot of film of Jack Gibbs. Interestingly enough, his high school team ran our system and our style of play, so we knew how well he fit even back in high school, and we've already seen it for the last 5 months when he's been in our gym. He is very ready to make an impact next year. Another player I mentioned, Hunter Adam. The school system in New Zealand and Australia, they begin in February and they finish classes in November. So Hunter graduated high school in November, and he was, he could have entered next August like every other freshman, but he wanted to enroll early, and we had a scholarship to offer him to enroll early. Hunter is 6'6". He is tough as nails. He is versatile. He is a lot better than we thought, and that's a funny statement to make because we thought he was pretty good. We knew that there was room for improvement, and he got here, and his shot looked a lot better than what it looked like when we had evaluated him. And we sat down 2 weeks ago and we had kind of an end of year meeting and things that we wanted to work on, what we wanted him to work on and focus on as he went home for a few weeks. And I said to him, I was like, Hunter, you're a lot better than we thought. And he said, like, hey, I appreciate it, but what did you think I was? Did you not think I was very good? So we are thrilled about Hunter. And again, 5 months of experience in this program will allow him to be able to make an impact next year on this team. And we are thrilled with what we saw from him from these past few weeks and past few months. 2 incoming freshmen, Bobby Durkin from Chicago, who went to IMG Academy this year, and Michael Loughnane from Boston, who went to prep school at Phillips Exeter this year. I mentioned both of them went to prep school. We don't have that magic formula for getting older here, but it does help that our freshmen this coming year will be a year older than most freshmen. They'll be as old as some of the sophomores on our team currently. Bobby is very, very smart. He is very tough, and he is incredibly crafty. He's about a 6'6", 6'7" wing. If everybody likes comparisons, I would kind of compare him to Keyshawn Pritchett. And he had a very successful year improving, but also playing at a high level at IMG Academy in Florida this past year. Mike Loughnane won a state championship at Boston College High School. He played for his father, who is in the Massachusetts High School Basketball Hall of Fame. Mike is very tough. He is very smart, and he can also really shoot the ball. So I've just mentioned Angelo being similar to Jack Gibbs, Hunter really impressing us with his jump shot, Bobby Durkin, who's a very good shooter, and Mike Loughnane as well. And some of you may have gotten to know Angelo or Hunter over the year, but Bobby and Mike coming in, they are special kids, and they are Davidson kids through and through. And I'm going to ask Austin, who introduced me, to drop a few things in the chat. There's a YouTube video of a podcast that an interview that Mike Loughnane did, and I believe many of you saw it because some have mentioned it to me. But it just shows the type of people we want to bring into our program. But also, I think it's going to give you some insights into Mike, so when he arrives, you'll feel like he's already a part of our program. But just an incredibly special kid. And then our 5th newcomer is Jarvis Moss, and Jarvis Moss is from Concord. He went to Cannon School. But he spent 2 years at Stanford University. Jarvis also can really, really shoot the basketball. And Jarvis obviously is coming to us as a transfer. We called the Stanford staff to learn about him. And, we're curious why he didn't play more. And their assistant coach said that he had a really good summer. After his freshman year, he had a really good spring. He had a really good summer. And they felt like he was going to play a really significant role as a sophomore. But then a guy named Michael Jones showed up and was a lot better than they imagined. Thankfully, we were able to watch Jarvis work out while he was home in Concord for some weeks during the spring, back home on spring break, to evaluate him there. Stanford was willing to share practice footage from their season to let us see what Jarvis looked like day to day. in their gym. He's going to be a great Wildcat, and we are thrilled about him. So we are optimistic about our newcomers and how they can immediately impact our team. Obviously, we're going to have to do some different things than last year. Sam Menenga was a scoring force at times inside. Foster Lawyer was so capable of doing so many things with the ball in his hands. First off, I believe we will be a better shooting team from top to bottom. Obviously, I shared some of the more negative shooting numbers, but I think when I highlighted some of the things we did this spring, in addition to the players that we are bringing in, we believe that naturally we have already addressed that and will continue to hopefully improve as shooters throughout the spring, the fall, and into the season. But we believe we have some very good shooters. I think we may return to playing more often, playing a 4-guard lineup more than we did this past year, similar to what we did with Mike Jones and Keyshawn Pritchett, those teams where we were pretty comfortable playing 4 guards. And that 4th guard could be Hunter Adam. It could be Ricky Gaddini. But even a non-traditional big guard like Connor Kachera or Jarvis or Bobby Durkin, who haven't the size and the length, but are really guys who are very good with the ball in their hands as well. From a defensive standpoint, we have some pretty athletic guys at most positions. I expect us to switch some more screens defensively than what we did last year. That was something we were able to experiment with, especially on those competitive days in the spring, and it looked like something that could be really effective for us. And then another thing, maybe the ugliest statistic from this past year was there's 363 teams that play Division I basketball. We were 363rd in the country in blocked shots. We did not block shots at all last year, to the level that we've never been a great shot blocking team necessarily, but oftentimes we can at least disrupt or block some shots. We did that worse than any team in the country. However, we have Sean Logan, who is a defensive problem. I mentioned him physically developing in the weight room and the weight that he has added. That's going to allow him to be more equipped. But we have some defensive schemes that we also experimented with this spring. We will continue to do in this summer that will allow him to be the rim protector that we did not have this past year. Currently, all our players are home. They finished exams 2 weeks ago. Commencement was last weekend. They went home after an incredible semester academically. We had the highest GPA in the history of Davidson basketball this past semester. We had a 3.4 team GPA. And I mentioned Hunter as one of our new guys who led us in the shooting competition. Our other new guy, Angelo Brizzi, he had the highest GPA on our team. So hopefully you see we're bringing in guys of academics, of character, of work ethic. Several of our players will return in 2 weeks when we hold our camp. We have a day camp and an overnight camp in June. Our 2 freshman newcomers, Mike Loughnane and Bobby Durkin, they will be here those times. We won't have as many players in June as we've had in years past, where they play pickup every single night. Our players now come back in July, which I'll talk about in a second. So we won't have the really enjoyable nights where some of you can come and sit in the stands and watch us playing pickup. We just won't have as many players here. But everybody on our team will return after the 4th of July. Achille Spadone, who we call AC, he may have a chance to play for the Switzerland under-20 team in the European Championships in July. So he may end up coming a few weeks later. And then Chris Sosnick, who was a manager turned walk-on, and if you would have seen him in our gym, he's terrific. As he was terrific as a manager, he's been terrific for us as a walk-on. He's actually going up to New York City next week to intern in the international department in the NBA. And that department grew through Chris Clooney, our athletic director. And Chris hired my brother, Brendan McKillop, right before Chris left to become our athletic director. And my brother has really helped the international department grow. And last summer, Brendan and his team hired Sorna Danishvar, who was a manager for us, who graduated in 2022, to work in their department. And now they have hired Chris Sosnick, one of our walk-ons, to intern for them this summer. And I haven't even heard from Chris Sosnick, but I think he's traveling to Australia and maybe to Senegal this summer with the NBA. So a pretty special NBA pipeline that has developed thanks to Chris Clooney and the wonderful people that have come through our program that have proven themselves to be the perfect candidates to help grow the game of basketball. So Austin, I'd be happy to open up to some questions. I'm sure some have come in.
Absolutely. And if anyone else has any, at the bottom, there's still that Q&A feature. So feel free to add these in as we go along here. Matt, let's start about one of our favorite topics in the office. Can you talk about the NIL landscape? We're entering year 2 of players being able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. Can you kind of talk about what you've been hearing and then how it affects the program and everything like that?
Yeah, I'll do my best because it's a day-to-day thing that we are learning. I've mentioned a few times the changing landscape, and the transfer portal and NIL, name, image, and likeness are easily the two things to point at for this changing landscape. And despite the rules that have been stated by the NCAA, and them being very clear, it is a big part of the recruiting process. I last week, I spent, along with Chris Clooney last week, I was down in Florida for the Atlantic 10 meetings. And it seemed that the entire focus of the 3 days of meetings was discussing the transfer portal and NIL. Several teams and coaches down there mentioned the messages on Twitter and the messages on Instagram and the text messages that several of their players were getting to be lured away by other schools. And often there was a dollar sign attached to that. Even as late as 10 days ago, as the transfer portal window was closing and players would no longer be able to be immediately eligible. We had calls with a few transfers that we were interested in pursuing, and some of them never brought up NIL, and we appreciated that about them. But some of them that was one of the first things that they asked about. And oftentimes that led us to believe that it was maybe not the best people to pursue. For us, it comes down to finding the right players who have the right values. And I mentioned a few times how we got better throughout this year because of the environment and the people in our locker room. And if someone is thinking more about dollars and NIL deals than they are about winning, that can really disrupt the environment. So obviously that's a little bit of a challenge. The transfer portal making so many options available, and the snap of a finger, you could be playing minutes next year at another school. And when you tie money into it, it can make options more and more attractive. If you think about who we've recruited in the past and on our current roster, well, there's international players. Well, now the challenge we are facing is high school prospects, college athletes can hire agents. So now that you've involved agents, especially with the international players, those agents can get on the phone and directly ask how much money you'd be willing to give this particular player. And it has eliminated some of the international prospects that we'd recruited for a while. And then all of a sudden there's an agent involved, and that doesn't necessarily lead them to Davidson. We have not dealt with it as much as some other schools because, we didn't have to put an entire roster together like some teams in the Atlantic 10 who added 5 to 10 transfers to their team. But the general trend right now is that if there is a player coming from a Power 5 school, from the ACC, from the Big 10, the Pac-12, they're probably at a school where the NIL money they are getting is maybe not incredibly significant, but it exists. So as they transfer, and I never want to think that we're down a level because I know we can compete with all those schools, but if they transfer to a lower level conference outside of the Power 5, there is some curiosity about what NIL money exists. And some are saying that that's been the biggest challenge they've faced in recruiting transfers, because so much of it is about NIL money when it comes from players that are transferring from the highest levels. So we believe that high school recruiting and then developing those players is going to continue to be our sweet spot. It'll continue to be our approach, is just getting the right kids who fit us the right way and have the values that we need and the values that fit with Davidson College. But then we're going to have to keep these guys, and I hope that we can. All that being said, and by the way, I shared an article with Austin today that can maybe share a little bit more insights than what I just said. And Austin, please feel free to share that. But that being said, we have had players on our team that have benefited and profited from name, image, and likeness. Some have had individual NIL deals. Some of you may have seen the fairly comical commercial of Foster Lawyer frying biscuits in the Bojangles Biscuits lab. Some of our players have deals with some of the establishments on Main Street or in Davidson, and 77 Grounds Coffee, I think, has had a few deals with some of our players and maybe some of the women's players as well for coffee. And they'll promote that coffee place on their Instagram or on Twitter. We also have an NIL collective, and that's something that fans and alums can donate to. And that's kind of the overwhelming thing throughout the Power Fives. And what I mentioned was a large piece of discussion last week at the Atlantic 10 meetings. And if you would like to learn more about that, about our NIL collective, Austin can also drop a link to that in the chat for those of you who want more information or have an interest in getting involved. It's and NIL and transfer portal. I mean, as crazy as this sounds, there may be a rule change coming up that is approved in which we will be playing or have the ability to play 2 exhibition games next summer. It'll probably be at the end of July or early August. And what was really interesting was no one's really prepared to do that. No one's really been with their team long enough, and it doesn't really make the most sense to play in July and August. A lot of the coaches down there were said, well, if we don't play some players in July and August, they're going to want to transfer out and start a new school by the end of the month. So in the conference meeting, they said, okay, everybody raise their hand. Who is in favor of playing these exhibition games in July and August? There are 15 coaches, only 1 coach raised their hand. And then it was discussed that what the reason that these games are taking place is because potentially going to be taking place is because John Calipari, the University of Kentucky head coach, proposed this. The reason he proposed this is because he hopes to sell out Rupp Arena in Kentucky, 18,000 fans, and their ticket fees go towards the NIL money that can go towards the players. So it has nothing to do with actually becoming a better team, playing better basketball, using the summer months to improve. It's really just an avenue to take advantage of some of the rules, or I guess take advantage of some of the deregulation that is taking place, and profit off of help their players profit off of the size of their fan base. So it is wild, and I'm sure by the end of the summer there'll be new things that some of those schools will be pushing for. But like I said, as long as we continue to seek out the right players, evaluate them the right way, and attract them to Davidson, I think we're going to keep doing our best to try to keep those players here.
No, that's great. It's certainly uncharted territory. Can you talk a little bit about Foster Lawyers' plans for this summer and for next season?
Absolutely. I mentioned one of the highest GPAs was Angelo Brizzi. Foster Lawyer was an exceptional student in his 2 years at Davidson, and he could have just mailed it in. He could have just gotten his degree. He could have taken the easiest classes and done the bare minimum work, but he did really well. And we nominated several players for academic honors in the Atlantic 10. And Foster, I've had a hard time believing he wouldn't make some type of all academic team beyond what he already made. Foster has been going through interview processes with NBA teams, and it's really unique what NBA teams are doing now is they have a video room, which usually has 3 or 4 staffers in their video room, and they do video work. They cut film, they create scouting reports, they do advanced scouts for their coaches. They want individuals, they being the NBA when they hire for these positions, they want individuals who are really savvy, know basketball, probably tech savvy, and can function the software appropriately, and can do a good job in the video room. But they love it when those players are talented and can compete as a scout team player against the NBA players day in and day out in practice. So that is what Foster is planning to do. And I say planning to because it's going to work out. I don't want to say hoping to. In the last week, I've spoken with the Jazz and I've spoken with the Mavericks about Foster being a candidate, and a reference call for him. He's also interviewed with 4 other teams. Those are just the 2 that happened to call me in the last 7 days. So I have a good feeling that the NBA teams are currently going through their coaching carousel, if you will, and hiring for those positions. And I think Foster might be going to Dallas this week to interview in person. But I'm very optimistic, and I know he is as well that he's going to have a pretty impressive opportunity to be with an NBA team next year in their video room as a coach, but also getting his itch as a player to continue to compete and do it at the highest level against NBA guys day in and day out.
That's great. So we got a couple here that people have submitted looking forward. Can you talk a little bit about what you know for the non-conference schedule, the Asheville tournament, or any other games that we have set?
Yes, I wish I had more information. I talked about the transfer portal, and it's very challenging to agree to a game, to schedule a team and come to a final agreement when so many teams are still putting their roster together. I imagine we will make some things happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I hope we do, but this is probably the least number of games we've had scheduled on May 15th than ever before. And it's not because we're not working. It's not because we don't have some possibilities in place. The whole college basketball world is in this spot right now where the transfer portal has held up our ability to do a lot of things. So we want to have a strong sense of who we are playing before we come to a final agreement. Austin mentioned the Asheville tournament and the Asheville Classic, and we have great memories from when we were able to go to the Asheville Civic Center. It's got a different name now. I think it's the Harrah's Resort and Casino Asheville Civic Center. But we have so many great memories from playing there and winning championships in the Southern Conference. So that was very, very attractive to us. That is Friday the 10th and Sunday the 12th of November that we will be playing in that event. And it's great because it's not just nonstop basketball. There's only 4 teams participating. So we'll play on Friday night. You'll be able to get to enjoy Asheville on that Saturday. And then on Sunday we will play. And I think it's an early afternoon game, and it's specifically set that way. Obviously we'll have a pretty short commute compared to the other teams participating, but for everybody to be able to get home and in their bed on Sunday night, having to get to work on Monday. But the teams in that event are us, Clemson, Maryland, and UAB, Alabama Birmingham, who had a really strong year this past year and is predicted to be strong again next year. It is not official yet, but the belief is that we will be playing Clemson in that first round game. We have our return game. We will be playing at Charlotte. The hope is that, and I may have mentioned this in years past, but now we've finally gotten it to a place where we are in agreement with Charlotte for it. But we will rotate between playing at Davidson like this year, at Charlotte, and then at the Spectrum Center in Uptown Charlotte to play in an NBA arena, to make that an attractive event for our fans, for their fans, and to have it a big celebration in the city of Charlotte. I mean, you open the Charlotte Observer, you're not reading much about Davidson basketball or UNC Charlotte basketball. It's just not covered. So we want to help make that happen. And by having an event in Charlotte like that could really be something that brings the attention back to the rivalry, but also to college basketball in this area. We return Wright State to our arena. They had a strong season. Interestingly enough, they had a player transfer before we played them. So 2 years ago, they had a player. He left. He went to Ohio State this year. He has decided he's transferring back to Wright State. He's really good. He had a very good year for Wright State when he was last there. Somewhat, probably feel like he had an underwhelming year at Ohio State, to the point that he felt like he needed to go back where he was more valued. So that is who we'll be seeing in Belk Arena. So I would think that they could be favored to win the Horizon League. We've been in talks with Northwestern about having a home and home series that would start in Chicago this year. And then at the last minute, they pulled the rug out from underneath us. They decided they were going to play Dayton instead. We've been in talks with Temple. We were going to play them in the Barclays Center. That was going in the right direction. The last minute, they pulled the rug out from underneath us, and they'd rather play, I think, the University of Albany, something that surprised that game is being played in the Barclays Center. So we're going to continue to try to find attractive games, but also the games that'll prepare us for conference play, and get all of you excited to come and watch us. But we do have our work cut out for us, but I think we're in the same place as most teams in the country in terms of putting together a schedule.
Yeah. Some of the player development piece for next season, how has Grant been this spring, and what's his development been like, and leadership looking forward to next season, especially with a lot of newcomers on the roster?
That's a great question. And Grant, I don't know how you feel, but I thought Grant was special this year. And when we were going through some of those challenges in December and January, one thing that we did was we decided to play Grant on the ball. We were doing that not for Grant as much as we were doing it for Foster, to help Foster not have as much pressure on him and defense's focus on him. We wanted to move Foster to the 2-guard position. And you probably saw Grant finishing in transition at the rim on layups in a way that you probably haven't seen since Nick Cochran or Jason Richards were here. He really pushed our break at a level that allowed our offense to be so effective. He had a very productive spring, and it doesn't surprise you. He lays it on the line every game that you would have watched, and he's no different in practices. From a leadership standpoint, it's interesting. You remove Foster just from our roster. I'm sorry, from our roster, but literally you remove him from our workouts because he was no longer had eligibility. And the first few practices, it was quieter. You didn't have that presence that Foster brought, that leadership, that communication that he brought every day. And slowly but surely, you saw that from Grant. And he's the guy our coaches go to when they need messages delivered. He's the guy our staff goes to when we need things to change with the level of focus or competitiveness or energy in a workout or in a practice. So we are incredibly pleased with Grant, and are certain that he will carry the momentum of what he did last year and take that into next year.
Got a few people ask similar questions now too. Can you talk a little bit about the development of Reed Bailey? He seems to have a good touch from 10 to 15 feet. It also, as a freshman, a lot of freshmen do, has passed up some open looks last season. Can you just kind of talk about what we've seen from Reed this spring and looking forward?
Well, what we saw from Reed this spring was we saw a lot of Reed this spring. He lives in the gym. Some of you may have been at our end of year banquet and I talked about it, but every single day and I'm serious, every single weekday from when the season ended, I'm talking 2 days after, we lost on a Thursday in Brooklyn. That Monday until he left after exams, I would walk in the gym in the back door of the Advanced Center and there'd be music blaring, and it would be Josh, our assistant coach, Josh Hayliger, and Grant in the gym, and Reed Bailey in the gym working. I think it's fair to say that Reed had some special moments this year, and there were some inconsistent moments. And someone mentioned his shooting. I think he made 10 threes on the year, and I could be wrong, but I think he made 4 of those in the first 2 games of the year, which means that 6 of them came in the final 30 games of our season. Some of it is confidence. Some of it is him having to improve his footwork. So when he catches it and when he steps into his shot, he has a level of comfort. Some of it is just being somebody new in our system and having a feel for where the shots are, what the right shots are. And, at no point were we ever questioning his shot selection. And I think you could probably say that about a few players on our team. And we wanted to, with such a young team, we didn't want them to have to think twice. We wanted to give them freedoms. But we have really been impressed by his development. And the biggest focus for him, in our opinion, and what we really tried to demand from him, and we sent him home with that development plan, was we need him more engaged in our offense. And a lot of times, probably to what you're mentioning, he would catch the ball on the wing and he'd be maybe open, maybe not open, and then he'd try to make something happen. He shouldn't have to wait for the ball to come to him for something to happen. We want him engaged, and without getting too technical, we want him setting more ball screens. We want him getting involved in handoffs. 2 things that Sam Anenga did exceptionally well this year, 2 things that Luka Brajkovic did exceptionally well 2 years ago. But we believe he has a similar skill set to all of the great front court players we've had: Peyton Aldridge, Luka, Sam, some bit of each of those guys in him. And he just has to figure out exactly how it works for him. And he's got to recognize that better. So, and one thing, I think there was like a 6-game stretch where Reed matched up with somebody who was 23 years old and in their 5th or 6th year of college. We went up against VCU in the A10 quarterfinals. Reed had a great game. He played really well. First play of the game, if you would remember, the first 2 plays of the game, they gave the ball to Brandon Johns, who was a redshirt senior. He was an all-conference player. He played for 4 years at Michigan. He's 23 years old, and that was Reed's matchup. That ain't easy. And we asked a lot of him, and he played, and he had some great moments at the beginning of the year that I think everybody believed that he was that all-conference guy that a 5th-year Brandon Johns from the University of Michigan was. And we as a staff, we were hopeful, we were excited, but we knew that it was going to be a learning process. And I think Reed is so much better off from the experience he had, the successes that he had, some of the bumps that he had along the road, and we're excited for what he's going to do next year.
We got one more about our current roster. Can you talk about our front court? I know you talked about Reed just now, but Sean Logan and David Skogman, any other contributors that we expect?
Yeah, so great question also. Reed, I think, has proven himself to be a player with a very bright future. David Skogman from mid-January, and he's in town right now, and he's been in our gym, and he's taking a contract class this summer. So he's the one player that's currently in Davidson, aside from Brock Matheny. we sat him down with our staff yesterday, actually, and we had our, kind of our end of season development plan. And we talked with him about how much better he played and how much he improved from mid-January through February and into March. I think Grant was our most improved player probably from start to finish, but something could be said for David Skogman in 2023 being one of our most, if not our most improved player, along with Grant's. You may remember it from Brian Sullivan even and Clint Mann when those guys arrived here. It took them a little bit of time to get comfortable, to get going, to be confident. Now those guys were coming with a year in residence in which they didn't play; they had to redshirt. But David came from an entirely different system, entirely different style, and had different expectations for himself and from our coaching staff. So we were really excited about the way David played, and you can look back at everything, but when he picked up that second foul in the first half of that game against VCU in the quarterfinals, that really, really hurt us. And maybe if he didn't pick up that second foul, maybe we would have had a little bit of a different weekend. Another player like Grant, who, Sam is no longer in the gym, and David really took ownership of the role he could have next year, and we want him to have next year in terms of being that front court player who can be the focal point of our offense. He's a great passer. He's proven to be a great shooter. And he had moments where he was a very good post player as well. And then Sean Logan, I constantly talk about his future, and I think we're going to see that sooner rather than later. We sat him down during the year when he wasn't playing many minutes, and we said, you just have to stick with it. Stick with this process. You're not going to be able to do it all by tomorrow. You just got to keep working. And a lot of it is diet. A lot of it is nutrition. But every single day, if you keep putting in work, it will work out. Sure enough, he played maybe his best game of the year against VCU in that tournament when he competed against those guys, and he changed the game defensively. So we felt pretty good about him coming out of that tournament. And we are still very excited about him. I mentioned playing a smaller lineup with Hunter Adam, with Ricky Gadini. Ricky, you guys have not seen much of, but he's incredibly long, and he's a pretty good defender because he blocks shots with his length, kind of unnaturally, but out of instinct. And he can really shoot the ball, like really, really shoot the ball. So we've challenged him to be that sniper in our front court. And you could say that about David Skogman as well, but we want Ricky, when he catches the ball, his first shot should be, I'm going to catch this thing and I'm going to shoot and make a shot. We do have a scholarship that we are recruiting for. So I can't answer the kind of that final piece of what you asked, Austin. There is a chance that may not happen, that may happen. And we're very confident with what we have right now. I think we would feel more excited if we had a little bit more depth. You have an ankle sprain and you have foul trouble, and, we could find ourselves in some interesting situations. We have total trust in Brian Seitz and Justin, our sports performance team. But we are understanding of the fact that, we lost a front court player. We haven't necessarily added a traditional front court player. But those five guys that I mentioned who can play the 4 and the 5, we're very excited for the direction that they're heading.
That's great. So any early thoughts about A10 teams for this coming season? I know the transfer portal is still shaking out. I know Richmond lost one of their best players today to the as a grad transfer, but any early comments, I guess, on what we know about rosters?
So I'll give you some quick insights on who you mentioned, Tyler Burton. Tyler Burton's agent, he has an agent. He played for myself and Jason Zimmerman at Emory. And I was told 3 or 4 weeks ago from my friend that he was going to be going to the NBA. He's definitely not returning to Richmond. So his plan right now is actually to go to the NBA. Like backup plan would be to go to college somewhere else. But yes, there's a lot of turnover on rosters throughout the Atlantic 10. Richmond may be seeing the worst of it, I would say. St. Bonaventure, I believe, is going to be pretty good. They've added some very talented players in the transfer portal, and they bring back almost everybody that was a strong contributor to their team. Now, we beat them twice. We felt pretty good about our performances in each of those games, but I think you could say they lacked depth a little bit, and they've really added some good pieces. They're all going to be older players as well. St. Joe's, I think, would be the hot team coming off the latter part of the year. They played really well. They gave us a great game in Belk Arena. They advanced to the quarterfinals, and they played Dayton down to the final seconds. And they return a lot of players, and they have 2 very talented players that I think, from what I understood last week at the A10 meetings, that a lot of the bigger schools were maybe trying to tamper with to pursue them in the transfer portal. So St. Joe's could be really good. Duquesne, another team that returns a lot of players and then added some players. They added a set of twins from LaSalle to their roster. So Duquesne, another team, and you're talking about three teams that maybe aren't the perennial powerhouses in Duquesne, St. Joe's, and St. Bonaventure, who could be really good. But then you got to always think that VCU and Dayton are going to find a way to be as competitive as they always are. And VCU had a major roster turnover, but their new coach, Ryan Odom, we know him a bit. Dave Odom is his father. He was at UNC Charlotte for a while. Came from Utah State. He has added in the last 5 weeks a number of players, and they now have a very talented roster that, 6 months ago, if you told me that's what VCU's team looked like, I would have said, that guy's coming from Louisville, that guy's coming from this school, that guy's coming from Australia, and they've got some really talented players. A lot could happen by the time I check my phone, and some of these guys are leaving those schools. It's crazy with the world we live in. But I think those 5 schools, and I thought that question could be asked. So I was actually wondering for the first time myself earlier today. But I think those 5 could be pretty talented.
Yeah. Are you finding a difference in the questions that recruits are asking today as opposed to previous years?
The one different question is NIL, and that sometimes comes up. And we kind of have our blanket answer about here's how some of our players have benefited from it. And that's really what we give them. And we try to be very vague, and we absolutely will stay within the rules, knowing that maybe some others will not. But that does not seem to have been a difference maker with those who have been on our campus, which to me says we're bringing the right people here. We're doing a pretty good job, at least immediately, of identifying who could fit at Davidson. I think some of the other questions that are new are, what does your team look like next year? What does your roster look like? And I think that's because there's so many teams that they don't have those answers. We love the fact that we can tell our recruits that when you get here, you're never going to have to look over your shoulder at us bringing a 23-year-old in, or a 22-year-old really in. Yes, it is a challenge for us, and whether it's known or not, to graduate from Davidson, 2 years of your academic work have to take place at Davidson. So obviously we can't get graduate transfers, but we also can't get junior transfers who have been in college for 3 years. So we're rather limited in that sense, but we love for that to be, and hope for that to be, a factor for why someone could see themselves at Davidson, knowing that we are entirely invested in their development. And we're not the kind of staff that, hey, if he doesn't work out in a year, we're going to be looking elsewhere and trying to find someone older than you to replace you. So those would be the 2 new ones. And NIL, it has not come up to the point that it's become a problem for us yet. I hope that remains to be the case. But there is a lot of questions about who is on your team. What does your roster look like? And I think it's because it's such an uncertainty for so many kids now.
Yeah. I think we have time for about 2 or 3 more here. So we recently announced an incredibly generous gift from Joel and Cheryl Williamson to the program, and an endowment. Can you talk about ways that improves the program and what that's going towards and what it's going to be used towards?
Yes, and I got the list of who could be on this call. I think it was like a week old. So if Joel is on here again, Joel, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody who has been generous to our program in some way. And Austin credited Joel, but I know others on here who have been so generous to us in many ways, and it is essential in so many ways to give our players the student athlete experience that allows them to be the best basketball players they can be and achieve as much as they desire and hope to achieve, while also having the resources to maximize what they have to do academically. The easiest thing to point to in my eyes is we were able to charter flights to Atlantic 10 games, and we are able to play a game at 7:00 in Dayton, and then we can be in our beds at 11:30. It's probably generous, but midnight, to be ready to step into the classroom at 8:30, and our players are expected to be in class, and those their professors expect to see them there. Having to bus back, having to get a commercial flight the next day, that just puts you in the hole academically that at a place as strong as Davidson, you can't necessarily come back from at times. So So that would be one. One thing that we've really invested in, and I gave you some numbers that show it to be true, is the nutrition of our players and being able to feed them and do it in a way that allows them to maximize the work that they're doing in the weight room. That sounds really simple, but it's really, really important. And in today's economy, it's pricey to feed and fuel our players in a way that when they finish a workout, when they finish their practice, they can get the right nutrition into their bodies as fast as they can to be able to benefit from all the work that they're doing. And then they don't have to worry about running over to the dining hall and when I'm going to study, when I have to get to this meal and when I have to get to the library at this time or this meeting. When we can feed them ourselves, it really helps them do everything else better in addition to getting bigger and stronger. There's several things that Justin, our athletic trainer, has come to our office and said, we think this could be really valuable for us to become better athletes, for us to become stronger, something we can utilize in the weight room, something we can utilize before practice or after practice for mobility, for hip function, little things like that. We may recruit freshmen who look like freshmen, but we're going to try to do every single thing we can to get the most out of them physically. And that's often an investment. We're not bringing in 23-year-olds. We're going to do everything we can to get the most out of our 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And there are a lot of tools out there that people try to sell you that may not work, but thankfully we have Justin who can find some of the right things and can allow us to hopefully invest in those with the support that we get from you all.
Yeah. Here's a good one. How can regular fans best support the program? Be it attendance, be it donating, be it bringing their friends and family to games. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Oh, I could tell you a lot of different ways. Yeah, I just touched on a few, and this is meant to be some, hey, give us your money. This is a fundraising call, and I know that's not what you're asking that was, but this world of NIL, it is crazy, but it is a piece of it, and we don't want to ever have to not get a player or not keep a player because of it. So that's one way. Finding ways for us to, have the budget money to provide some of these luxuries that we can potentially have that allow us to get to class and to maximize the work that we do. But I love what you said about coming to games and bringing friends to games. Susan Mercer, she went to dinner the other night in I can't remember where I think it was in Concord. She said she went to dinner and she bumped into some season ticket holders, and I'm sorry, she bumped into some friends of hers who happened to say, oh, these are my friends, they're season ticket holders. And they by the end of that conversation, they were joining the Fast Break Club, and they said that they're going to try to bring some of their friends to come to games and hopefully join the Fast Break Club. So word of mouth is great. Bringing friends to games is great. If you have season tickets, we would love you to use those for every single game. And if not, please make sure someone is using those tickets, or let Susan know so that we can help our family of our players and staff sit in the best seats possible. But I say spread the word. I could tell story after story about each of our individual players and what makes them great and what makes them special and why they're so perfect for Davidson and why we have it as coaches, a lot better than a lot of people, because we get to be around the kids that we are around every single day, and we don't have the headaches that a lot of other programs have. For us to have a new coach and for us to have a record that we probably weren't excited about and wanted to win more games. And we had one scholarship player go in the transfer portal. That's pretty unheard of. I think there were 5 teams in the country that didn't have any player transfer. I hate to say that we're proud of only having one, but we are an outlier in that sense. And I think it's because we have the right kids, and they're great kids. And finding ways to get to know them by coming to our games, by listening to their interviews, by coming to the Red Black game and the press conference, and then telling your friends, hey, this is who your kids should look up to. This is who your kids should try to aspire to be like. And, that could be coming to our basketball camp too, but surrounding or allowing those people to surround our program and allowing them to get ingrained in our program will certainly put them around some special kids who can make them feel pretty good about cheering for Davidson. Our coaches are pretty decent too, in terms of the type of people they are.
So we'll do one more actual coaching question, and then we got one more, and then we can wrap it up here. So VCU has recently hired an analytics director for their basketball program. Is this something Davidson has considered, or how does analytics? I know it's one of your favorite topics. How does analytics play into the program?
I think that you just try to make the biggest staff possible, and you try to think of fancy titles to give them. That player, we played against him a few years ago. Matt Hart, is that his name? I think his name is Matt Hart. He played at GW. He transferred from a Division III school. And by no means do I think he is not very astute with analytics, but I bet he's going to be doing the same role that Matt Williams or Jack Gibbs or Josh does at times. We are very interested. I don't want to say invested, but I guess we are from a time commitment standpoint, but we are looking at numbers constantly. There's several companies that we work with that help us see numbers differently. We have benchmarks from a statistical standpoint that we've really revamped, I guess, since I've become the head coach, that we didn't look at the same way that we've tried to look at from less of a box score look and more of an efficiency look. So a little bit higher level of analytics, but nothing that I could not explain to most of you over a cup of coffee. So yes, analytics is a big thing. And ultimately what it often does is it proves you're doing the right thing or proves you're doing the wrong thing as you already knew you were doing. But for us, we've tried to use it to help inspire our players, to motivate our players, to show players what they're doing well, to show players where they need to improve. And it also helps us game plan for our opponents, knowing what their statistics look like and what their focal point is and what they're good at. So I don't think we'll ever be in need of hiring an analytics director of analytics. We have a group on campus that we've talked about for years, Cat Stats, and they're very helpful, and they send us a pretty incredible scouting report. If we play a game on Wednesday night, by the time we get out of that game, in our email inbox is the analytical scouting report for that next game on Saturday. And it's very impressive. So I would not hesitate to say that we are doing exactly what VCU is doing from an analytics standpoint. We just didn't add somebody to our staff with the title that makes them think they're something special. And what they can do is they could say, hey, the NBA to a recruit, the NBA is really analytical, and here's the person on our staff that we've hired to show that we're just like an NBA organization.
Very fair.
I give you that whatever type of response.
No, that's fine. Last question. I think it's a fun one that our fans are really going to love. Something, you and the team and myself were lucky enough to see recently. Can you talk about Steph's new documentary on Apple TV, Underrated, what it was like and what something like that means to Davidson and Davidson basketball?
I mean, it's a commercial for Davidson College, Davidson, the town, Davidson basketball. It is amazing. I mean, people were crying. I mean, those of us who have been around and been a part of, and were in some ways a part of that Elite Eight run, were emotional seeing it. You were reliving that experience of being with that Elite Eight team. And I got to be a fan during that year. I was working at Emory University, and Jason Zimmerman, our head coach, we drove up to Raleigh. He drove. I flew to Detroit. It was incredible. And this is about as amazing a way of reliving it as possible. Our players all got to see that. And we got together. Some of you may know there was a few showings of the movie. One was at the film festival in Utah. What's it called? Sundance Film Festival. There was a showing in San Francisco, and there was a showing here on campus. And our players got to see that. So it was really it was special. And I hate to get caught up in what today's college landscape is, but you saw a team overachieve, and that you saw it with Steph Curry leading the way. So you saw Steph's story, but you really saw Davidson, the town, the school, the basketball program overachieve because they did it as a team. And it's all of you will absolutely love it. And I think it could shed an incredible light on this school, and it will. And it was really cool seeing Jason Richards, a good friend of mine, speak on the panel afterwards. And he gets emotional in the movie, talking about missing the last shot. I think I got the last shot poster up there right behind my desk. But it's now I'm just kind of blabbering about that. But it is really amazing seeing, my father's Del Curry, Jason Richards get up there and talk about what that film meant to them, what that run was like from them personally, and then being able to watch that and relive it again. I think it can do. It can continue to allow Davidson to appear as special as it is through the eyes of Steph Curry.
And then I may be wrong here, but I also saw some other Hollywood on campus lately. I saw Grant Huffman in the trailer for the new LeBron James high school Disney movie.
Yeah, I wish I could give you more details about that, but last summer, I think it was last summer. It could have been 2 summers. Yeah, I think it was last summer. I'm checking in with Grant, seeing what he's doing. He's like, I'm in the gym. I was like, oh, okay, you getting a workout? And he's like, no, I'm filming for the movie. Like, what are you talking about? And I guess there's a scene or two that flashback to LeBron's high school days, and they gathered the better players in the city of Cleveland, and Grant was one of them, and asked him to participate in the filming of it. And so Grant will be, I don't want to say featured in it, but he is in the movie for a couple scenes. I think he has 1 or 2 lines. Maybe they got cut. But yes, you'll see Grant on the big screen too, if you choose to see. I'm going to watch a Steph movie before I'm going to watch a LeBron movie, but Grant will be out there this summer too.
Absolutely.
I think that coming out this summer.
Yeah, I think it comes out any week now. I was watching it and I saw LeBron back cut and dunk, and I thought it was Grant looking up at him there. So
Yeah, that would be Grant. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions. If you have any closing remarks before we end this.
Yeah, I guess I will share, because I don't want, this to pop up and after giving an overview of the team, people be curious. I mentioned availability and how I knocked on wood about how healthy we were this year. Believe it or not, with 5 minutes left in the final workout, that Friday competitive workout, 5 minutes left in the workout, Ricky Gaddini, who had a terrific spring, dislocated his finger. He's a lefty in his shooting hand. So he dislocated it. He popped it back in, went on to the next possession. He actually made a game-winning 3 in that final possession, but unfortunately, it turns out he broke his finger, and there was damage to the tendon as well. So he had a pin put in. He had surgery. Had a pin put in. He's back home in Italy. He's getting that pin removed soon. He'll be back in July. He'll take a few weeks to get ready. But the one negative thing I'll mention about our current outlook is that Ricky's going to be on the sideline for a few more weeks. For those of you who are in the area, I mentioned we're not doing those pickup games like we have in June after our camp, but in the month of July we will have workouts. And some of you who are on here know that our doors are open for you to come and observe, and that's sometimes a way to get to know our team. Sometimes it's a way for you to bring a friend who lives down the street and ends up becoming a fan and maybe getting tickets to our games. So if you'd like to reach out to me or Susan or somebody in our office, once July hits, we would always welcome you to come and feel free to observe our workouts and practices. And I do have to say, this year was insanely eye-opening for me in many ways. And I know I did a lot of things wrong, but I did something absolutely 100% right, and that was putting together the staff that we have. I mentioned Brian and Justin, but Josh, Matty Ice, we call him Matty Ice to not confuse him with myself or Matt Matheny, but Matt Williams, Will Regal, Jack Gibbs, Matt Matheny, and Susan. I mentioned the chaos that I heard about in the Atlantic 10 meetings last week and being around those coaches. And I got some stories about them and their staffs. Well, there's no staff that has as much fun as our staff. And I can promise you, there's not a staff in the country that cares about their program more than ours.
No, that's great. Well, Matt, thank you so much for getting on here tonight, and everyone else who could jump on and join. Thank you so much. I know I'm excited for the season to start, and I hope you all are too. And that's it. Thank you so much. We'll likely have one of these as well right before the season too. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, everybody.